Hello, and thank you for watching another edition of ARFCOM News. This is episode 45 because they don't make a 46 yet. That's next week. This week, I'll tell you about Daddy Warbucks going broke, a New Jersey man who got arrested just for trying to do the right thing, and another installment in the thrilling saga of the fickle feds. But first, I want to tell you about the wholesome, non-GMO, sustainably sourced, gluten-free, zero-trans fat, low-carb night vision products offered to you by our friends at TNVC.com, just like Mom used to make. If you like seeing stuff more than not seeing stuff, take a look at our sponsor, TNVC.com, your source for quality night vision gear to make you the bump in the night. All we ever seem to talk about lately are the constant changes the ATF keeps putting us through. But wait, there's more. First things first, don't go chucking all your guns and braces in a lake just yet.
Did anyone think to dredge the lake?
This latest thing is just an advisory from a law firm called Wiley to manufacturers and importers, mainly the latter. It's also highly speculative, and let's be honest, whether they intend it or not, this letter will likely net the firm a few clients. Let me give the best explanation of this I could come up with.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
The ATF has the responsibility of enforcing unconstitutional federal gun laws that were written in an era of Jim Crow and other laws that are now universally accepted as being grossly immoral and unconstitutional. It took many court battles over the course of decades to get those awful laws repealed, but the Second Amendment was only incorporated in this century, so there has been an almost complete absence of Supreme Court rulings on the matter for 100 years. Nevertheless, the ATF has to enforce these archaic and poorly written laws, and that means they have to figure out what these laws even mean. But the National Firearms Act of 1934 includes language like this. So, setting aside your personal beliefs about whether the law should exist, if it was your job to enforce this law, how would you decide what a rifle is? A lot of it comes down to that word intended. What determines intent? Is it the intent of the maker when it was designed or redesigned, made or remade, or the intent of the end user? The laws are badly written and lacking objective criteria to make determinations. The NFA doesn't define a pistol, but it defines any other weapon as being definitely not a pistol. Let me run that past you again. The 34 NFA defines an AOW as basically a small gun that's not a pistol, but it doesn't define what a pistol is. That's because the NFA was originally intended to include pistols, but the authoritarians pushing it didn't have the political clout to get it done. And that language was removed. And it gets worse because they also have to interpret the 1968 Gun Control Act and a host of other laws. And the GCA does define a pistol as a firearm which has a short stock and is designed to be held and fired by the use of a single hand. And then there's the sporting purposes clause of the GCA. We could go down a rabbit hole of confusing, contradictory, and vague federal laws, prior ATF interpretations, and executive orders, all just surrounding the sporting purposes clause, but suffice to say, the ATF used to think there was no problem importing pistols that are based on rifle designs. And here's the thing, so far as we know, they still do. Wiley's letter indicates the ATF might change their mind again and lays out some solid reasoning as to why, I think. I'm not a lawyer because I was born with a soul. It's not the ATF's fault Congress put them in the awkward position of having to interpret bad laws. What is ATF's fault is they have done so in an arbitrary, capricious, and secretive manner. Over the last several decades, they have changed their collective mind multiple times. The issue of pistols derived from rifle designs has been around for a very long time. All sorts of guns have been previously accepted as being pistols, and AR pistols had already been around for decades before pistol braces came on the scene. The main problem is an end user could use an AR pistol with a brace in the same manner as they could use an AR rifle. Of course, you could do that with just the buffer tube. Does that magically mean the gun is now intended to be fired from the shoulder? Okay, let's say that's the case. Well, the GCA defines a pistol as a gun that's designed to be fired with one hand. I think everyone can agree my Glock 20 is a pistol, right? Does it stop being a pistol if I use a two-handed grip? If so, what is it now? Is it an AOW just because I put my other paw on it? The short answer is you don't actually know. The The ATF has been using subjective standards to arrive at their fleeting and transient opinions, and they've been mostly secretive about the process. We know that in some cases they have allowed individual agents to make subjective determinations of whether they personally are able to fire a gun one-handed without difficulty. We know they have measured pistol braces at odd angles in order to determine if they meet their entirely arbitrary and made-up standard. They have published a list of what they insist are objective standards, but you'll notice many of these are actually pretty subjective because they aren't listing weights or lengths or other empirical measurements. The fundamental problem here has three parts. The ATF refuses to publish clear and empirical standards. The ATF constantly contradicts itself and changes its position. The ATF seems to believe it can interpret the law in any way it wishes, not according to the lowest level of infringement possible, which ought to be the standard anytime constitutional rights are involved. Lots of folks are speculating the ATF is doing this intentionally to hurt Trump's chances of re-election, but that honestly doesn't make any sense. Let's step through this. So hypothetically, some deep state steppy boys figure, hey, you know what'd make Orange Man look bad? If we arbitrarily ban more stuff, because our agency falls under his branch of government. Okay, great plan, guys, except when we continue following this same line of logic, sure, some people may be mad at Trump for allowing a culture in which this can happen. I'm right there with you. Yes, absolutely. Trump has let gun owners down by allowing this, 100%. Okay, so now I'm mad at him. Full Orange Man bad, right? You know what? I'll show him. I'll vote for... Oh, wait. I mean, sure, maybe this thing splits off a couple last-minute Jorgensen voters, but I think the overwhelming majority of folks who care about this issue are still going to be voting for Trump. Or against Biden, whatever leaves less of a bad taste in your mouth. See, if this was a move to hurt Trump, it's a very poorly considered one because it is only energizing his base. Other people have speculated it's because the Fed NPCs think that Trump is going to lose. Okay, that's at least a little more rational, but I still think it's kind of dumb because they can't be certain. If you want to indulge in conspiracy, then why can't it be a scheme from the administration to get Trump's base fired up? Of course, that's dumb too, because honestly, only a tiny fraction of gun nerds like us even know about this whole thing. No, I think the most likely explanation is just typical government bumbling and incompetency combined with a general culture of derision and malice toward gun owners within the ATF. So, what do? First and foremost, get out there and vote if you haven't already. Second, every one of you should call and write your politicrators. Go to contactmypolitician.com and tell them how you feel. Tell them the ATF is out of control. Tell them that no matter where they stand on gun control, we should all agree the rules should be public, clear, and consistent. Demand transparency and accountability. If there has to be a boot on my neck, I deserve to at least know what size it is and whose foot is in it. With all this uncertainty about ATF opinions, maybe you're wondering whether your own brace pistol is legal. Here's how to measure correctly according to official BATFE guidelines. Please note that ATF specifies a wooden yardstick for this measurement, but a tape measure should be a suitable stand-in. The procedure is to begin at the base of the shaft, go around the receiver extension 2 to 3 times, and then make a half hitch followed by a bow line. Once those are secured, you can check where the end of the brace lines up with the scale. Be sure to carry the one and account for spin drift. In all seriousness, these issues may eventually wind up at the Supreme Court, and with Amy Coney Barrett on the bench, that could be very good for us. Imagine if huge swaths of the NFA and GCA were subject to strict scrutiny. Can the government successfully argue that a de facto ban on short barrel rifles substantially furthers the compelling government interest of reducing homicide? Who knows? The possibilities are endless. I'm so excited. Maybe someday SCOTUS will put an end to unconstitutional infringements, but until then, we are stuck groveling before the state for permission to buy or build anything on the naughty list, such as a silencer or short barrel rifle. If you want to build a silencer, you file an ATF Form 1 along with fingerprints, photo, and $200. Up until recently, you could have an expert help you fill the form correctly and file it electronically, but the ATF decided that was just too efficient and convenient and put an end to it. So 110 Congress critters joined hands to sing Kumbaya and implore U.S. Attorney General Barr to impose sanity on the ATF's e-filing process. If your Congress critter is on this list, be sure to contact him or her to praise him for doing the right thing. It's not widely known that politicians don't eat food like normal people. Instead, they survive solely on attention, so they respond well to praise when they get something right for a change. Friends, I wish I was finished telling you about the long train of abuses and usurpations from the ATF in this episode, but I'm not. You know those sketchy fuel filters you see on internet ads all the time? I think most of us assume they're ATF honeypots, and who knows, maybe some of them are, but many trusting souls have actually bought them. And apparently, there are even some folks out there who think they are actually fuel filters. Because Matthew Moran of New Jersey ordered a couple and then was surprised to find what he got didn't look much like a fuel filter. It kind of looked like a silencer. So he took it to an auto parts store where the attendant confirmed his suspicion and advised it was a common mistake. So Moran dutifully went to his friendly neighborhood police station to turn in the forbidden tube. He told them he ordered 2, but only 1 had arrived, and he planned to cancel the order for the second one. He did attempt to cancel the order and even told the post office he refused delivery from the seller, but nevertheless, the second fuel filter still arrived at his home about 2 weeks later. So Moran turned in the second one, and that's when local, state, and federal cops descended on him and arrested him right there in the parking lot of the police station. As he was making a good faith effort to turn in the thing he told them about. Great sleuthing there, guys. Just solid police work, you know. Moran's attorney, Evan Knappen, said, in other words, in response to Moran's initiating contact with law enforcement, voluntarily surrendering a package of questionable fuel filters that he received, informing the authorities about a second potential package, and doing everything that he could to stop its delivery, government surveilled him, followed him, and set up a trap to arrest him. Can we get a crowdfunding site started for Moran? How old is an adult? You have to be at least 14 to work in many states, 16 to drive, 17 to enlist, 18 to vote, smoke, or buy a long gun, 21 to drink or buy a pistol, and 35 to be elected president. For some bizarre reason, American society considers people to be mostly grown-ups at the age of 18, but we're just all over the place on a handful of other issues. I'm not being remotely hyperbolic when I say the age of adulthood ought to be the same for everything. And yes, young people should be able to get permission from their parents to drive or work a job or do other adulty things, but I believe the age we consider a person to be adult should be the same for everything. And you know what? Maybe it isn't unreasonable to set the age at 21. As I understand, human brains aren't normally finished developing until about age 25. I know that probably isn't a popular opinion, and I certainly wouldn't presume to speak for everyone here at ARFCOM on that point. You might also fairly argue that it is easy for me, a Gen Xer, to advocate raising the age of adulthood when I'm already safely into middle age. But in Pennsylvania, it is illegal for a 20-year-old to carry a gun. At all. Period. End of mission. Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf issued a royal decree 2.5 years ago to consider PA to be in a state of emergency because opioids. Now, I could go on at length about my opinions about the failed drug war, but that's not important right now.
A hospital? What is it?
It's a big building with patients, but that's not important right now.
What is important is this unilateral state of emergency, which has no end in sight, invoked a Pennsylvania law which makes it illegal for a person to carry a gun without a permission slip from the government in the form of a license to carry firearms. To get this permission slip, a person needs to pay the Crown, submit a form, and in some counties, genuflect to the almighty state in person. You also have to be at least 21 years of age. That leaves no legal way for adults from 18 to 20 to carry a gun, and that violates their Second Amendment right to bear arms. Not to put too fine a point on it, but I would argue being unable to purchase or carry a handgun is also an intolerable infringement on the right to bear arms. If 18 is adult, then you must be able to buy, possess, and transport all bearable arms. But the argument is often made that since it is legal to carry a rifle or shotgun, then the right to bear arms is intact, regardless of how impractical it is to carry that way. I think that's almost like saying your right to free speech is still intact if you are allowed to lug around a typewriter with you, even though a mobile phone is a much more practical way to exercise that right. But no one bans phones. So the Second Amendment Foundation and Firearm Policy Coalition are suing Robert Evanchik, Commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police, for violating the Second Amendment rights of young adults in Pennsylvania. The FPC's Director of Legal Strategy, Adam Kraut, said Pennsylvania's statutory scheme unconstitutionally and impermissibly denies young adults their fundamental individual right to bear arms outside their home. Through this case, we seek to vindicate our clients' rights and restore individual liberty for millions of young adults. The FPC and SAF are also litigating in the Miller v. Becerra case, which is the case regarding standard capacity magazines, which California has repeatedly lost, but somehow the law remains in effect.
Why won't you die?
Miller versus Becerra has been scheduled for an accelerated bench trial January 21st, the day after Inauguration Day. If you would like to help the SAF and FPC fight authoritarian control freak policies in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, please take a moment to visit saf.org and firearmspolicy.org to make a donation. The courtroom is where the real fight is, and these guys are absolute pipe hitters. Get your pointing figures warmed up, because it's time to point and laugh at oligarch Michael Bloomberg for failing to do the one thing oligarchs should find easy: spend money. Bloomberg's puppet AstroTurf organization Everytown vowed earlier this year to spend $60 million pushing authoritarian gun policy, but so far they have only managed to spend $25 million, and they only have $5 million left.
Let me do the math here. Nothing, and then nothing.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to make their goal. The winner of last week's t-shirt is this comment from Damage Magnet.
The ship had been stuck in port for nearly a week. The run-in with the Crown's Armada had left the old girl battered and beaten, and the crew had only enough money between them to fix most of the ship. All that was left was to find some new sails. The old ones went to drink with the mast, after all, so the stealthiest crew member, one Mr. Hefner, was tasked with getting into town and stealing something to make do that night. With the first rays of light, the captain and crew stumbled out on the deck to the fluttering of sails. As the captain looked up, his jaw dropped. The mainsail looked to be pieced together from the canopies of the town's market sails, but the triangular sail on the fore of the ship was red, silken, and shaped like a heart, trimmed in lace. Mr. Hefner, the old captain, bellowed, "Where did you manage such a ludicrous jib?" Mr. Hefner, with a smile on his face, simply replied, "Whorehouse." There were lots of other really well-written submissions, but this is my party, so I'll cry if I want to. If you'd like to win your choice of rad shirt from our Teespring store, post a comment containing the phrase "pick up that can" in the YouTube comments, and I will arbitrarily and unilaterally choose the best one. Keep it PG, and I might read it in the next episode. Well, this is the end of the line for Phantom 309. I hope you enjoy watching these things, because I sure like making them for you. If you want to help us keep bringing you banger content like this, please support the folks who support us. Not only does TNVC.com carry a wide selection of low-carb, fat-free, non-GMO night vision products, they also have mounts, lights, and all sorts of other gear you need to make you the bump in the night. And if you want to support us more directly, you can get fly shirts just like this one in our Teespring store. I love you.
4 more years of Georgia, he is going to find ourselves in a position where, if Trump gets elected, 4 more years of Georgia,